Hello, I am Plarndude. I make Plarn sleeping mats for the homeless, and I give them away. I have some thoughts that I wanted to speak out loud in a video about taxes and about the economy. First of all, we have a fiat currency. That means it is money because the government says it is. USD, United States dollars, do not grow on trees. You do not dig them out of the ground. You do not get them from the company you work for, because the company has to get it from customers. Customers do not get them from the companies they work for, because those companies have to get them from their customers. Where does it come from? It comes from one single source. Mostly. The United States federal government. Okay? That's why it's called United States dollar and not Central Bank of the United States of America dollar banknote. Okay? It's not a banknote from the central bank privately owned by some dude that is not connected in any way to the government. No. The government decrees money to exist. The Federal Reserve then creates that money in its own system, okay? It writes it down in a ledger, okay? And then transfers that money to federal government control. The federal government is then able to spend it. I'm referring to, of course, modern monetary theory. If you've never heard of it, look it up. Hashtag MMT. The Federal Reserve transfers money in the form of United States dollars to the United States government's accounts to be able to do things with, using the financial vehicle called federal bonds. That means that they are considered debt. And that gets put up into the statistics called the national debt. The problem is, it's not actual debt, because the federal government will never pay the Federal Reserve back all the money that the Federal Reserve was decreed by the federal government to create. It doesn't work that way. The Federal Reserve cannot take back all that money that it's created, plus interest. The Federal Reserve's interest rate affects only the loans handed out to banks and other really big businesses that are able and allowed to take humongous loans, like billions of dollars, from the Federal Reserve, which is basically a bunch of banks. It acts like the central bank. Okay? The Federal Reserve then is able to control monetary supply itself using the interest rate. Once that money has been created and transferred to the federal government is then able to spend it into the economy. What does it spend on? Military, infrastructure, all sorts of things. The federal government is big, and it does a lot of things. And it pays a lot of people to do a lot of those things. People earn money, people spend money. That's how the economy works. We trade our efforts and our ideas and thoughts to get USD currency, which we then trade for the efforts of other people. The fruits of my labor become currency. Currency becomes the fruits of your labor. And then you use that to get the fruits of other people's labor. That's how an economy works. Currency is always being reduced because people like to save. People like to be able to retire. So they put money away and don't spend it. Currency is meant to circulate. That's what it does. That's its job. It circulates through the economy, like your blood circulates through your body. It carries things from place to place. It carries value from place to place. The value of my work and my time is traded for this thing, which is then traded for the value of your work and your time. And then you trade that for the value of somebody else's work and time. If there isn't enough money available to trade, then yes, the value of your work and your time compared to that currency goes up. The value of the currency goes up, and thus the value of your savings go up, and the value of your investments go up. But the lack of supply also means that there will be moments when you don't have the availability. You don't have the thing that you use for trade to get what you need. That's called a run on the bank, when a bank doesn't have the currency physically available to hand out to people when they all want their money. And the bank literally goes bankrupt. That's called when a government going completely bankrupt and not being able to pay on any of its obligations because it doesn't physically have the currency available to spend on the things that it needs to spend. If a government cannot spend the money it needs to spend, what happens? Things get shut down. We've had government shutdowns, but only because Congress decided not to spend. Not because they lacked the funds to spend. Our federal government will never lack the funds to spend because it is the source of the funds to spend. It creates it. And that money is being removed by people putting their money away for later, people investing their money, people selling their money abroad, and that money gets stuck somewhere, like in a vault or something, in somebody's bank account somewhere. It just sits out there not circulating. It also gets removed by taxes and fees. The federal government is constantly removing money from the economy, so it is no longer circulating. There needs to be a balance between the amount of money going into the economy and the amount of money coming out of the economy. But so many people want to abolish the taxes that remove money from the economy, and they want to abolish this whole money creation thing. They want the government to stop printing money out of nowhere and go to a non-fiat currency like gold or Bitcoin. But like I said, that could mean supply doesn't meet demand. We need to have supply meet demand. I just experienced something like that with Bitcoin. I had a whole bunch of Bitcoin that I wanted to spend. I wanted to take this amount of Bitcoin and send it to this other Bitcoin wallet address. But even though my Coinbase account said I had this much value in my wallet, it said that I did not have the amount of Bitcoin available for sending yet. So I could not send that amount of Bitcoin. I had to wait 8 days for that amount of Bitcoin to become available for me to send, because Bitcoin is a currency that doesn't change. Its supply doesn't change. It changes, but only a very small amount. And that's one of the things that is attractive about it. A lot of people like that it's stable. The supply is stable. They can depend on exactly how much Bitcoin there will ever be. But that means that at some point, the amount of USD currency I put into my account on Bitcoin and trade for Bitcoin will mean that I won't have the amount of Bitcoin value available to actually do anything with. I had to wait and 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 wait for the amount of Bitcoin that they said I owned to actually be available to send. And that's the exact same problem that started fiat currency in the first place. Fiat currency started as banks that had only a certain amount of gold in their vault, and people that wanted to put gold into their account and then spend that gold. And sometimes the bank just wouldn't have the amount of gold available. It was already spent, it was already gone. They were doing things with it, they were, investing or whatever. They weren't just storing gold for people. They were taking the gold and doing things with it. They were spending, and doing things with it. So when everybody wants to get their gold back, it may not necessarily be there. So the lesson what the banks learned was, hey, we can do this thing called fractional reserve banking, where we lend more money to people than we actually have. We just keep track of it in our ledgers. So and so borrowed so and so amount of money. Here's the bank note that says that this is how much money you have in your account, and you can give this to somebody else and they will accept it, and they will go, okay, I'll put this into my account, and all we do is take the bank note and just write something into their ledger that says that this amount of money has now, this value has then been transferred to their account, their ledger, their piece of paper that says this is how much value they own in their account. That doesn't necessarily mean that's how much gold is available for them to just physically take out and do things with. And governments around the world soon realized that they needed more money than was actually available for them to spend out of their coffers. How are they going to do anything? How are they going to pay their soldiers if they don't have enough physical gold coins to pay their soldiers? They realized, hey, they can do this thing that banks are doing. They can take out these bank notes that say that there's this much value, and they can give it to their soldiers, and they can give this bank note to buy supplies, and they can give this bank note to do whatever it is that they're doing. Governments used bank notes, and the banks got rich. Well, we've been using paper out of nowhere for thousands of years now, okay? It's just a thing that people have been doing. They've been writing things down in ledgers. Fiat isn't gonna go away. We're gonna keep using fiat currency.